We're actually starting the webinar off focusing on profitability, feature sets, as well as what we call the unified access devices and how they help our partners drive profitability, our channel partners drive profitability through the feature sets that they're actually using, as well as the ability over time to increase those actual capabilities and service sets that they're actually using. So some of you may have been in some of our earlier presentation that really spoke about either the sales portion or about the technical side of things. Well, we're going to look at how do we sort of start to put those together for our partners. So what we're going to focus on as we go through the presentation. Obviously, focus from an ICC networking standpoint is the fact that we would like to make sure that communication is simple, especially in an age of what we call hyperconnectivity, which is being driven by the increase in the number of IP-based devices. So those IP-based devices could be anything from laptops to mobile devices to things as large as the smart grid systems that may be doing IoT or maybe trying to put smart meters on buildings and other things like that that we actually deal with. So in the near future, we're looking at over 50 billion devices connected by 2020. And so how do we then monetize that? How do we then also deal with the flood of those devices on a physical IP network that may very well be wireless within the building, wireless outside the building, or even from a wired infrastructure standpoint? So the overall architecture of the solution that we're going to go through today, and we're going to pick a specific piece of that solution, is focused really on delivering control, performance, and flexibility. So when we're articulating our message to our channel partners, is particularly our installers and service providers, we're really focused on how are they able to better control the information that comes into their systems, improve performance, as well as have flexibility so that they keep their costs low, while at the same time making sure the customer is able to accomplish the SLAs needed or accomplish their own individual networking needs as well. So we're definitely not in the habit of preaching about having unmanaged devices closer to the edge. We prefer have intelligent devices closer to the edge to deal with those what we call bring your own device or bring your own content, as well as the Internet of Things. So as we sort of jump into things here, you'll see that our product line is actually divided out into really 4 primary sections. There's the unified access device section, which typically is an all wireless kind of environment. The access control system, which is a premise-based controller that can also be virtualized, sit at a data center, or sit at on-prem at the customer environment. The Raptor X product line, which is for larger non-line of sight 20-mile connectivity so those would be used more in larger muni campus kinds of environments. And then we have our cloud solutions that then enable monetization, marketing, ad engines, guest access, monitoring, and some other feature sets as well. So what we're going to focus on in this presentation is really about how do you, from a value being delivered, both on the infrastructure as well as on the services side. We're going to focus on what we call the unified access device side of things, which tends to be more of an individual managed or cloud managed platform. So part of the value of delivering cloud platforms is the fact that you're saving on hardware. You don't have a premise-based equipment to necessarily produce from a product standpoint, or to deploy from a product standpoint. Deployment costs are also lower. Typically, cloud-based platforms tend to be a bit simpler and easier to set up. Less configuration is necessarily, less IT overhead also. Your energy costs are lower because you have a smaller on-site footprint. While this may not necessarily be significant because of the power draw of 1 or 2 additional units, over time, if you're talking about multiple locations in a very distributed environment, you can actually get fairly expensive from an energy perspective. Software cost, typically with premise equipment, you tend to have a lot of licensing Unlike the ICC version, where you don't have a lot of licensing, but your typical premise environment does have a lot more licensing, as well as support and maintenance costs. And then it's also from a scalability, you're able to, with the cloud environment, scale much higher than your typical premise equipment. And then security is something that can be complex, has to be layered on, and so sometimes a lot of organizations, particularly smaller organizations, don't have the wherewithal or the IT experience to do that. So cloud-based solutions help from that environment. They don't have to worry about the back-end expense. And then, of course, the overall ease of use. Now, on the other side of that, the value of enabling service capabilities, and this is where a lot of cloud-based systems typically fall down, because they remove the intelligence from the edge and they put it back in the cloud 100%. But in a more of a Internet of Things, IoT tends to work in a very, very interesting way, similar to the internet, where you can call up information from different devices. So the ability to physically do that requires more intelligence at the edge. So, the devil's in the details, basically, right? So basically, as we start to look at how we deploy cloud systems to create value for our service providers, as well as the applications that those service providers are looking to use, then we start to then marry those two things together to better understand profitability over the long haul. So when we look at this, as we're getting into the product side of things now, you have to consider all of those factors. So considering the ability to have more devices get on the network, so have an efficient network environment, and then also still have a simple environment to network. You then, over time, with the ICC product line, and we're going to focus on the unified access devices, because there are more feature sets at the edge, the client is able to deliver more services over a longer period of time for that customer, which means a greater value and greater profitability for that particular customer over a longer period of time. And we'll show you exactly how that is physically done. One of the comparisons that we are often asked to make from a value perspective in these kinds of environment is ICC versus Ubiquity. And it doesn't have to necessarily be Ubiquity, but there are a lot of other cloud-based companies out there where what we recommend is that there are a lot of questions that you have to ask, right? Does the solution really resolve the customer's issue, or is it really driving upgrades? Are the edge devices simply collectors of information or intelligent policy holders? So do they know the information? Do they know the difference between voice, video, and data? How are they handling that information? And can they categorize it to make sure that there's proper delivery? Are they using the cloud, quote unquote, term cloud, simply as a tool to help reduce costs, which is very, very viable, and not as a tool to drive revenue? So we've not only used it as a tool to drive costs, but more importantly, what we see it as is a tool to drive revenue. So you have data analytics, you have more detail about that information, because our edge devices are more intelligent to tell the service provider what is going on in that environment, and the service provider then is able to offer services to their actual client, which increases loyalty, increases profitability over the long haul as well. So as we highlight just some of the differences just in these two environments, to allow customers, one or two items I'd like to sort of point out really quickly is the fact that you have in the Ubiquity, and typically in some of these entry-level cloud controller environments, it only supports 4 SSIDs. And that's interesting because, in the sense that if you're using SSIDs as a way to give secure access to different parts of the network or specific parts of the network, then you're limited to only 4. Whereas on the ICC side of things, you have 16 SSIDs per radio for a total of 32 SSIDs that can be portioned out. So not only do you need SSIDs for your guests, but maybe your management, maybe your engineering staff, or maybe your accounting staff is on a separate VLAN on a separate part of that network. Maybe in some cases where we've seen different class of machines have different SSIDs, so robotics, and you also have the ability then to, if you're in a more of a hospitality environment, or in a mall environment, give different mall vendors their own individual SSIDs throughout that mall environment as well. So again, greater flexibility in the actual physical platform, which then drives more revenue, more capabilities in the long haul over your traditional cost-effective solution. Now, one of the things that we're going to go through, as I mentioned, creating simple network environments doesn't have to be hard, merely because our devices are intelligent, highly intelligent, and are able to do things that you typically do not find in the entry-level marketplace, does not mean that it's very, very difficult. The unified access device architecture is very flexible. It's available for any IT environment. So whether you have a full-blown large IT staff or an entry-level staff, it simply depends on the feature sets that actually you want to use. And so how do we then how do we then make up the physical network environment that's called the unified access device? It actually are three components. There are actually two of which will go together. There's the icX10 UAD and the icX20 UAD. The 10 UAD is the indoor access point, and the 20 UAD is a NEMA boxed IP68 outdoor AP that can also be turned into a firewall, a bridge, a NAT routing device supporting WDS as well. And then our second version of the same physical product line is the icX10 UAD Cloud, and then there's the cloud version of the outdoor version as well, and both of those work with what's called the icXmanager Smart Cloud Management. The reason why we separated out the product line to have a cloud-based managed system and then a non-cloud-based managed system, even if it's the same physical device, is that we have some customers that most of those customers typically use the cloud environment for simple management globally, internationally as well. But then we also have some integrators that have their own back-end systems, their own location-based services, their own routing services, their own capabilities. And so the traditional icX10 UAD is actually a device that is a little bit more open source to allow engagement and interaction with that operator's back-end system as well. So let's just dive into some of the specifics around some of these from a value standpoint. On the cloud side of the solution, the icX10 UAD and 20 UAD Cloud, they can be automatically deployed with zero touch. When they are plugged in, they automatically go back, connect to the cloud environment. They can be globally supported from a visibility standpoint. It's a very simple, unified platform, which then also allows the user to then drive and focus on their return on investment. So it's very cost effective from that standpoint. The system also already comes with 1 year of cloud support already included. So the already aggressive price point includes the management system as well. And then, of course, from the cloud perspective, the service provider can automatically do the normal things such as provisioning and customer account management. It is what we call a tenant-based system. And what that simply means, as you'll see on this slide here, is that it allows from a single point of view one service provider to then deploy multiple environments with their own name on it, so that their customers, they can set up their customers as XYZ company, and they only see XYZ company information, give them certain levels of administrative rights to do different things, as well as be able to then control those different environments, different SSIDs as well. So they can very artfully, without the back-end costs of trying to develop and build their own cloud-based environment, have the ability and security with secure SSL to be able to then standardize on an 11AC gigabit high-performance environment with that cloud management that have multiple levels of administrative systems as well. So driving that value, how do you then set that up, right? And this really, we're just going to go through a couple of the very simple to use environments that a service provider would actually be going through when they actually deploy these on site. You know, the 11AC may be deployable in certain areas such as pools and, you know, outdoor patios, decks, different streets, you know, outdoor from a building standpoint, campgrounds, anywhere that you need an outdoor kind of product that's deployed, as well as the indoor, the icX10 UAD cloud can then be used for small offices, multi-location, sort of non-technical kinds of environments, but yet still managed in a single ecosystem and drill down by that individual business customer. Where is that physical device physically located in that customer's environment as well? And then when from a support standpoint, what then happens is that the business, from a visibility perspective, has the ability now to then very closely manage that customer environment. They can track each business. They can track them obviously globally. They can identify the different customers. They can notice the different total number of customers. So, for example, in a retail environment, they can actually let that retailer know if that you have 5 locations or 10 locations. Let them know from a reporting perspective how many people showed up at a particular location. They can show them, you know, how many people registered, got online, and then we have another tool called the icX Cloud that allows them to monetize that environment as well, right, with ad-based networking, triangulation, and location-based services also. So when we start looking at it a little bit more from an operational perspective, not only are they able to make sure costs are effective from an ongoing services perspective, but you can also do proactive monitoring. So you have multiple levels of alerts, right? Not just simply alerting you to everything, but it's quite possible based on the SLA with a customer, you're able to then say, okay, is this a minor alert? Is this a major alert? Is this a priority alert? And set those different alerts to then go to different individuals. So in some instances, whether or not maybe it's a level 1 technical support issue, maybe it's an on-site issue, and with that customer, they've decided they'll plug and unplug the unit, or plug and unplug, or the gateway for connectivity, or whatever that is, based on the definitions of the contract. You can actually physically set that. So from a usability perspective, they have the ability now and flexibility, which you don't find in most systems. Typically, an alarm is an alarm. But it doesn't break it down by actual service levels that you can actually do based on the agreements. So when you start looking at it from a client perspective as well, you then have the flexibility fairly from the ability to not just simply see all of locations, but then deploy at different types of locations and different kinds of environments as well, and make sure that there is performance based on our patented software that's already included also. So when we start looking at different levels from a global perspective, from a reporting standpoint, the service provider is also then able to, on an ongoing basis, provide detailed kinds of reports back to the actual physical customer. So when you look at the total package of the cloud system, the 10 and 20 UAD cloud, and the icXmanager as an actual bundled product line, you then start seeing the viability of this solution versus the traditional common cloud-based solutions in the marketplace as well. More importantly, what ends up happening is the ability to then expand. So you have a lot of customers that may very well start off with a few clients in this environment where it has to be simple Wi-Fi delivery for different kinds of clients. They want a single pane of glass to manage it from a dashboard perspective. They still need to deliver security, track everyone, have flexibility for innovation, and then obviously drive adoption across their whole facility or multiple locations as well. And then obviously see and track the different clients. But then what happens a lot of times is that sometimes they grow beyond that. And this is where you start seeing the integration side of things come into picture, because we have two different sides of our UAD platform. There's the cloud side, and then there's the non-cloud side. And it's very, very important that we understand the differences between them, because based on the client's capability, they can really drive higher end features with the non-cloud side integrated into their actual platform. And so you'll get bigger providers, more integrator kinds of people, companies that have their own cloud-based systems. They may have their own tracking systems, their own SNMP-based management systems as well, and they want to be able to then control the unit. And this is where that integration comes in, right? The ability for them to control multiple levels of security, the ability to control the content, so that we have one partner in Canada today that is doing location-based services and triangulation for retailers, all based on their own back end, but based on the fact that they use this open source platform to be able to then control the Wi-Fi and have control of our Wi-Fi environment as well. There are a lot of features. We're not going to go through all of those features, but just sort of understand that there's a certain level of additional features with this particular platform that gives these integrators a lot more control and a lot more minutia to drive down into as well. And as we said, from a service provider perspective, service provider value, the white glove service side of things gives them the ability now to do greater integration. This is where we get, sort of our development partners on board, and those integration partners that work from an engineering standpoint with us to develop their own systems, as well as their own ways of dealing with IoT and machine to machine and such things. Now, how do we see this? As they get integrated, same basic pattern, but they have more flexibility into the actual physical system itself. They're able to control the system from the back end, log in remotely, be able to have reporting pulled out of the system back into their own service provider management back end, and then deliver a single glass pane to their customers. So you tend to see this in environments where there may very well be apartment buildings or large deployments, for hundreds or thousands of these units, and the service provider is using their own physical back end. From a visibility perspective, it gives them multiple authentication methods. They are able to do multiple levels of encryption, different levels of radius authentication and accounting support, as well as client isolation, hidden SSIDs, and a number of other things. They are also able to, aside from the standard business class security methods, they're also able to do more hospitality-oriented kinds of capabilities, such as captive portal and multiple levels of captive portal as well. So should they be getting into hospitality and food service and retail, this would definitely be the platform that they would then integrate. And then it also gives them control over the networking and content control side, where they're able to then, even with these small access point of the ICX10, be able to then offer services out, such as firewall, MAC filtering, control bandwidth based on SSID, so they can have an environment where they have a mall area and assign bandwidth based on the different requirements or SLAs for that particular customer as well. So all in all, what we're looking at is a very, very robust hardware, software, wireless platform and device that allows a lot of different device, user, and application-based policy and content controls. It allows to drive the customer experience in the direction that the integrator wants it to go in, with greater integrator use and input, because they're actually controlling the physical system as well. Much like in the data center, where you have bare metal switching and much of those environments, they're able to load their own software and control that hardware environment. These integrators are pretty much able to do a very similar kind of thing from the wireless environments that they're engaging in as well. So coming down to this is our second to last slide here. So when we start looking at the totality of the solution, even though we look at it from a singular hardware platform that is able to then be put into multiple types of modes, our service providers are able to then, based on their capabilities, based on their need, as well as based on how they would like to approach their own market segments, they can then deploy one part or all of the actual solutions that are in the ICC ecosystem. And then based on the revenue and profitability that they're looking for, whether or not they use an open platform to then integrate in with the hardware to be able to then better control a lot of the content and information via their own system, whether or not they're not able to do that, but they want simple connectivity with back-end single dashboard, they can do that with the icXmanager. Whether or not they want analytics and monetization, where they're able to better control and see and provide reporting based on ad-based reporting, or if they're a very, very large provider on the ActiveArc side of things, where they need global distribution of a physical network as well. So from a customer perspective, we're able to drive business revenue and profitability based on features and flexibility over a longer time for a greater amount of loyalty, and yet at the same time still start off at a cost-effective base, because the physical hardware is being delivered to the customer at a value price point. So when we start looking at this from the top level, we end up having a single value statement. After having said all of that, ICC networking is able to deliver not only and solve the problem of connectivity over the long haul with white space non-line of sight wireless broadband, to be able to penetrate through walls, trees, around mountains, through buildings, etc., over long distances and even over water, but then into the wireless LAN environments, where we focused today on the unified access devices and their plethora of feature sets that can be done via the cloud from a standalone perspective, as well as an open source perspective, to then drive content and revenue to our partners to have a better total cost of ownership, and also better ownership of their network environment, to even our virtualized premise solutions as well. So our solutions enable not just the SMB, but also the enterprise networks to be able to realize that level of efficiency and flexibility from a network standpoint in the age of IoT and machine to machine. So what we are doing is we continue to do multiple levels of our white glove service partner programs, where we introduce our partners to different levels of the technology and walk them through what their true capabilities are, that they don't necessarily have to sit for a canned set of products with a canned set of product lines and a canned set of feature sets that they have no control over, and that they can't add value to as well. So we have the ability of deploying and helping them deploy simple to deploy solutions, as well as solutions that they integrate, or full-blown enterprise global solutions as well. So that brings us to the end of our presentation for today. We do appreciate your time. What we'd like to do is we'll definitely be contacting you to better understand your interests, as well as if we need to go through more details with you. So please feel free to make sure to contact us, or let us know if there are any additional questions as well. I will stay online for a little bit longer and make sure that there aren't any additional questions, if anyone has any additional questions.